Got it.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today, I have a special guest joining me to talk about a couple of our favorite books by Stephen King. So today, we're going to be talking about The Stand and It, and I have Mike here. I really doubt that you are on my channel and don't know who Mike is, but I will allow him to introduce himself just briefly.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I'm a constant reader, and that's what I'm famous for reading Stephen King books. So, if you read Stephen King books, I like to read Stephen King books too, and I like to talk about them. So I'm thrilled that you want to talk about these because when we talked last, you hadn't read it yet. So I'm very excited to hear this new fresh take.
Yes, I'm very excited. So I had joked on Discord that I could finally be a real Stephen King fan now. I could get like my membership card stamped because I have loved his books for so long and somehow made it this, like, I think it's been 20 years since I read my first Stephen King novel and I had not yet read it. So I feel like that is an accomplishment and I'm very happy that I have finally gotten to it.
I am happy you have done it as well.
So basically what we're going to do in this video, we're going to keep the beginning spoiler free. I just wanted to bring Mike on here and he didn't find this out until a couple minutes before the video. So I apologize for that. We're going to chat about these two books. And I know that I get a lot of questions and I'm sure Mike gets like 10 times the number of questions about where to start with Stephen King. And especially for these two books, which are kind of, his tomes. These are his big giant books with all these multiverse tie-ins and a couple of his most well-known books. So I think people often want to know, where should I start and which one of these books would appeal to me specifically if I have, XYZ reading tastes. So I thought that we could chat through them, maybe talk about what each one does really well, some of the things that might prevent you from liking one over the other, and just give people, I guess, some advice. I think it's probably going to be a lot of positive, like go read both of them from both of us, but just help point them in the direction of which book they might prefer.
You want me to go? Well, I get the question all the time, where should I start with Stephen King? And I always tell people, they'll say, well, do you want to be scared? Okay, that's the first one always. And I'm like, well, that's why I haven't done Stephen King, so I don't really like to be scared. So I tell them always start with different seasons. I think that's the best place to start because it's low commitment. There's 4 short stories in there. And I mean, well, for Stephen King, they're short. They're like, 200 pages a piece. But, for him, that's pretty short. And it's not really horrific. So you can really start there. Now, if you want to be scared, I tell them start with Pet Sematary. I think that's the best place to go where it's going to be the most easily approachable. It's not a humongous read. It's not difficult to keep up with or anything. There's not a large cast. But I say if length is not a problem with you and you love fantasy, I say go with The Stand. If you love horror, you love the coming of age story, I say go with It. And if you just want a romance story, I say 11, 22, 63. So those are the 3 big boys that everybody's always like, look, I've heard great things about these, but that's a hell of a commitment. So I think if that's what you're looking for each of those, I would absolutely recommend starting here.
Definitely. And I think you did that kind of one sentence summary or one sentence pitch really well, because The Stand is very much this, what is Stephen King's take on the epic fantasy tale? Mm-hmm. And it does have that blend of something that is going to absolutely, freak the crap out of you and give you the most heartwarming, nostalgic, coming of age story that you've likely ever read. So I think that is definitely, you've kind of hit it exactly right there.
Yeah, people see The Stand and they see the cast size and they're like, that's just too much. And I'm like, tell people, what is Stephen King the best at besides scaring people? It's developing characters. And trust me, there's not a single character in that book that you're not going to feel you're either going to hate to love or love to hate in more ways than one. And then plus it has like one of his most iconic villains ever in Randall Flagg in it. So yeah, it's definitely a great place to start. And again, like if you're a fantasy lover, but you're not quite ready for Dark Tower, I would absolutely say The Stand would be perfect for you.
Most definitely. And I think that gives us a good jumping off point because you mentioned that large cast of characters in The Stand. And both these books, respectively, have their own pretty substantial cast of characters. But in The Stand, we definitely get to follow more perspectives. And I think even though we get great villains in both of these books, we get more insight into the villains when we're reading The Stand. So how did you feel, I guess, when you were reading the two, how did you feel? We'll start with the villains first. How did you feel the villains kind of compared between the two books?
Well, Randall Flagg, I think, is really quite mysterious for the majority of the book. And I mean, I would argue, even if at the end of the book, because I mean, it's a character that pops up multiple times in his universe here. With Pennywise, like right away, you're like, okay, giant scary clown ripping kids' arms off and stuff. You know, this is yeah, I kind of know what he's about. You get the idea, you get to hear the things. You know, he turns and kind of take the shape of what you're most scared of, kind of thing. And who isn't scared of a giant clown with razor sharp teeth, right?
Mhm.
So I think they're different in that way, and that Pennywise, while he's very much up in your face, what I liked about Randall Flagg was that he's more of a mysterious, but he also kind of has like this ethics code that you wouldn't really imagine with a character like that. You know, he's not just wanting to. He actually wants like a new society kind of in his image, but not quite the way that you would expect a mustache twirling bad guy to have. And I think that's what makes him a little more nuanced, more layered than most villains are. And that's why those are my two favorite King villains right there.
Mhm. And I think that when you go into a Stephen King novel, if you haven't read one before, then you can expect this. If you have read it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get a lot of nuance from all his characters. I feel like for most of them, now he's got a lot of work and there's always going to be some misses in anybody's body of work, but for the most part, we're given this really nuanced exploration of evil and what it means to be evil, how people succumb to dark thoughts or what direction their life takes. And in The Stand, at least for me, I felt like if you're looking for that exploration of what it really means to be evil, as opposed to in It, where you kind of have evil incarnate and you have to react to that, I feel like in The Stand, we do get a little bit more of that exploration. And even some of the characters that you expect to be on the hero side, you get to see some of the more villainous aspects of their character, which I think is really interesting as well.
Yeah, all those side characters, and usually in most novels would just be in the background, and he puts them like in front. Like I think about like the character like Lloyd, who is very obviously conflicted, you know. But I think it's just stuff like that's what makes his books great. Now these two books, I mean, they have such big casts. They have my two favorite literary characters that aren't the villains, and Larry Underwood in The Stand and Ben Hanscom in It. You know, so I mean, these are just I could just I'm not going to stop myself because I'm just going to talk about every single character. But I love Stu and Glenn's relationship in The Stand a lot. I think that's a really, really important one. Really good when you get to a certain age. If you have like a mentor kind of thing, I think that's something that's really going to reach out. Now, I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that you're going to find everyone. I don't want to say you have to look at it and be like, hey, that's me on the page, not like that. But it's going to say something that's happened in your life that you can kind of relate to with both of these books. I think that's what makes them really stick at 1 and 2 for me.
Definitely. And I think you told us that your favorites are Larry and Ben, respectively. What draws you to Larry as a character? I feel like these are very popular characters for a lot of people, but what specifically in that huge cast of characters draws you to Larry?
I think with Larry is it's like someone who's made a lot of mistakes and he's finally getting his moment. You know, it's this is what I always felt like is I'm finally going to get my 15 minutes and then the world's going to end. You know, that's kind of how I felt with Larry. And very much he takes a journey on the book in a way that you wouldn't really expect him maybe to be like a hero kind of character. You know, so it's just what makes it such a great arc in that, you know, this is the guy who's the last popular song before the world ended. So everybody's kind of humming this tune, you know, baby, can you dig your man? You know, I just love those ideas of, you know, you're finally getting your big break. And then that happens. And now with Ben, I'm not going to lie. I was the fat kid in junior high that lost a lot of weight between, you know, because I moved to a new state, didn't know anybody. So I just lost all the weight over the summer. So I obviously was able to find lots of things to do there. Plus also the thing about, you know, being in love with a girl and she's in love with your best friend, you know, so I've had that
Oh,
kind of stuff go
no.
on before too, you know, so I think with all of his characterization like that, you're able to find something that you can relate to your life, even if you don't say, hey, that's exactly, I mean, you feel like you wrote me into the book. I don't think it has to feel like that to be able to empathize with these characters. And even if these things haven't happened to you, you're going to care for the characters. And someone like me, where character is what matters more than anything, that's why I keep coming back.
Definitely. I found it really difficult actually to pick a favorite in It. In The Stand, I really liked Larry. I think everybody really likes Larry in The
Yeah.
Stand. He's got such a great arc. He's a great character. You, like you said, you can really see that struggle within him because when he begins his journey, and I don't think this is a spoiler because it's a 1,200 page book where there's
Yeah.
a lot of journeying, but he begins it as a pretty self-absorbed, kind of selfish person, and then has to learn how to adapt to this world that's changing, to be responsible for other people and other people's lives. And it really is an amazing arc. And I think the size is intimidating, but I really do think that Stephen King makes use of every one of those pages in The Stand.
Yeah, these two books, people would be like, "Oh, they're so long." I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, man. They could have been another 500-600 pages, and I loved it. And I just tell people when you read The Stand, I was like, just don't rush it. Just accept this is what you're going to be reading for a while, you know? And I think that you're going to enjoy it. If you feel like, I don't know, some people feel like they got to race through books these days. And I think, and I'm not trying to be derogatory towards audiobook. I think this is audiobookers thinking, I've got to get this and I got to jack it up to 3 speed and get through it. With The Stand, I mean, obviously I'm always going to say, hey, do an eyes only read, but I understand everybody's not like that. They can't all do that. But take your time. Where's the fire? You know, if you need to take breaks in between things, there's 3 different arcs in the book, you know, part 1, 2, and 3. I think you have breaking points if you need to, but I don't think you're going to want to. You're going to be enjoying the journey so much that, again, it's like when you read Lord of the Rings, are you going to be like, oh, I got to hurry up and get through it? No, man, just enjoy the journey. That's definitely how I feel about The Stand. I never understand why people try to feel like they got to rush it.
And that's a good segue, I guess, into talking about the pacing. These are obviously 2 huge books. I think The Stand may be a little bit longer than it. I haven't.
The uncut one is, yeah.
The uncut one is a little bit longer, but they both clock in at over 1,000 pages. And I think for anyone who's not used to reading books that are that long, they might wonder if, you know, does it flag? Am I going to hit pockets where I'm not interested anymore? Do you feel like the pacing works fairly well in both of them? Or is there one where you felt like more compelled to keep going than the other?
I never felt like it slowed down at all. I thought it was perfectly paced because it bounces between, you know, the younger versions of themselves and the adult versions. So I feel like that keeps the pacing strong. In The Stand, there are some parts where they're trying to reestablish society and they're having town hall meetings and stuff. And I understand that that's not compelling reading to some people. For me, that's when King does all of his character work, is during those slow moments. So I hear a lot of people talk about there's parts in his books where they're not doing anything for like 200 pages. And I'm like, that's the stuff with King I love the most, because I'm getting to know the character. So, but I can understand how that's not for everybody. So between the two, yeah, it, I think, has perfect pacing. Stand might have some parts that don't click for you, but I never think it's to the point where it's like, oh, this is the slog and Wheel of Time or something, where you're really just like, why did he take, 4,000 pages to say what could have been done in 100? I never felt like that at all.
No, they feel like much shorter books. I have read 600-page books that felt much longer
than
either one of these books, for sure. And I think you're right in saying that with it. So in it, if for people who have not read it yet, you have this dual timeline of the main characters in their childhood and then in adulthood. And I think that you're absolutely right, Mike, that swapping back and forth between perspective makes things feel like you're kind of clipping along at quite the pace. And he does a really good job, I think, of leaving you with like the best cliffhanger as you're jumping from one timeline to the other. So it makes you want to kind of get through. And it is definitely not a race, but it is hard not to race through them. It is, especially with it. I agree. It's so hard to not want to just keep reading.
Well, no, I don't. I'd say if you want to binge read, hey, go for it. I'm saying I see people like complaining about, oh, it's just going to take me too long to read that. And I'm just like, I don't know. That's just weird complaint to me. I mean, if you don't have like some crazy tight schedule, I don't see why you would need to rush it. That's just a me thing. That's something that's hard for me to adjust to. And by all means, I know everybody's life is different. I love the book so much. So anytime there's any kind of criticism, I'm protecting them like a child, so that's all.
You need to shelter them, keep them safe from all absolutely. The naysayers. No, I think that I did find with The Stand, no, I can't lie. Neither one of them. I didn't really feel like either of them. There was a lot of slowdown or places where I felt like I was slogging through. Like you said, I did feel like the pace was just that little bit stronger. It was paced really well. And I did like the dual perspective. I think that added a lot. But in The Stand, we get to shift perspectives as well, except this perspective shift in there is kind of going between the good versus evil, I guess, if you want to categorize it in those terms.
Yeah, Vegas and the Boulder Free Zone. Yeah. Which I find both compelling. Yeah.
Yes, equally compelling in different ways and disturbing in different ways.
Yeah, very.
One thing that really surprised me about it, so that one of the reasons that I held off on reading it for as long as I did is because despite my love of Stephen King, I also get really scared very easily. So it takes a lot of courage for me to make it through. When I read Pet Sematary last year, I didn't know if I was going to actually make it. I didn't know if I was going to make it through the whole thing.
So
But
did this actually scare you any?
so I didn't find as scary as I was expecting. I thought that the parts that were creepy, there was a lot of disturbing content. There's a lot of the stuff that King does really well. So the exploration. So we have this embodiment of evil in Pennywise, but then we also get some of those antagonist characters who I felt to be even scarier. The
Yeah.
things that we can come up with as humans, that darker side of humanity, to me is just as or more frightening than anything that Pennywise can kind of throw at you.
Yeah, we all knew a Henry Bowers, I think, in our childhood. So yeah, I think that's a character that you just know in real life. King encountered somebody like this to write that kind of character. But yeah, but him and oh god, the Leech kid. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. Too many Malazan books right now. I got too many names floating in my head. But yeah, you never look at leeches the same way after you read it. But I think with it, I wouldn't say it's like I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my god, I'm scared, whatever. It's just it leaves stuff in your mind that you're going to think about forever. Like I said, me not scared of storm drains, but you know what? I'll still kind of take the long way around the street to walk around one of them. I'm not afraid of anything grabbing me, but I'm scared enough that I'm not going to find out. So
I didn't like brushing my teeth. Like the
yeah,
night
the
that
drain.
I was reading the book, I was like, oh, like, nothing's gonna happen, but what if something happened?
Yeah. Like I say about Jaws, no, I'm not scared of sharks, but I'm scared enough to stay out of the water.
Right? I think that that's sensible. I don't like the ocean. I think we share this fear. I do not like the ocean in
No
general.
thanks.
So gonna stay out of that one as well. But one thing that I think also helped with it, if you're really worried about the scariness factor, is that there's such a good balance, and it's such a stark juxtaposition between those really frightening, disturbing moments and the really tender moments in the friendships. And I think that's where it shines. So whereas in The Stand we get to see the building of a community, we get to see how people come together on a larger scale. In it, we get this very intimate look at friendship and what friendship looks like in those kind of pre-adolescent years, which I think really tempers a lot of the scary aspects of it. And for me, at least, was the strongest aspect of the whole book.
Sure. And I don't like to say like, oh, you guys that are younger than me, you didn't have the same kind of childhood. What I mean when I try to say stuff like this is like, growing up in the 80s was closer to growing up in the 50s, I think, than growing up in the 90s was to growing up to the 50s or the 2000s, basically the post-internet world. It's a little different than it was, but I was able to latch on this because what I loved about The Body in different seasons, Stand By Me for people who've only seen the movie, is that it showed that endless summer, you hanging out with your friends, riding your bikes, that kind of stuff. Really, really well. All the stuff that people loved about Stranger Things, that was the stuff that really clicked with me. And so when he did it, I felt like basically, okay, so you're doing The Body, but you're going to add a big scary monster into it. And bullies, I loved this. I mean, because you had Ace in The Body, and then you had Henry Bowers in it. So I felt like it was a lot of similarities there, almost like that was kind of like the test drive before he got to it. But yeah, I just love the way he's able to capture childhood friendships and how those really do make a lasting impression on your life and for your entire life. I love that. And that's one of the things that makes the ending, which I'm not going to spoil, obviously, really, really hurt even more when you think about it.
Definitely, there is. He does a really good job of capturing that kind of tenderness of youth, the ways that you can be close to people that kind of slip away from you as an adult. I know even now when I watch my kids make friends, it's just an entirely different process than trying to make a friend as an adult. It's not at all the same. And I did grow up a decade after you, but I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So there were no computers.
Balances out.
there was nothing. So it was a very similar feeling. It was that rural, I feel like he captures that rural spirit well as well, because what it's like to be in one of those towns where people are kind of run down and there's not a lot of options. And, you find your group of kids, you're kind of thrust together because that's who's there, and you find your own little pocket of friends. And it really does, it makes you so nostalgic. And I am a sucker for that nostalgic atmosphere. And I think that in it totally pulled me in. It was so well done.
Yeah, I mean, me being the big sucker for coming of age, if basically someone wants to sell a book to me now, there's something, hey, it's got a coming of age story in it, I might be like, all right, I'm going to add it to the list. So, and nobody does it better than him, obviously. So
Definitely. And I think we all know, anyone who's watched your channel knows where it ranks amongst your Stephen King picks. It is your favorite Stephen King book, if I am not mistaken.
You're correct. You are correct. You are correct. Stan's number 2, but when anybody drops on the channel and says, "Oh, well, I think Stan is his best book," I won't argue with you. It's really close. It really is.
Yeah.
Just to me, it has the childhood stuff that I love. The Stan doesn't have as much of that.
Definitely. And I was surprised. I thought because The Stand was more the kind of epic fantasy take of Stephen King's, that it would also be my favorite, that it would win out over it. But I think that I really do think, of all the books that I have read by him, that it is the best. I cannot make the case for any other book outside of Dark Tower.
This is like arguing, do I like pizza or cheeseburgers better? That's really what it is, right? So
yeah, they're both great. But I think that's a good introduction for people who haven't read either one of these books, and they maybe want to pick one of them up if they're wondering, what might fit their specific tastes. What I will ask, and this will be our last like non-spoiler question, I want to get your opinion, because Stephen King's endings are very polarizing for everyone.
Especially for these two.
Especially for these two books. So without spoiling anything, just giving your general impression, how do you feel about the endings of these two books?
I think The Stand, it's probably a little hokey, but I mean, if you listen to the messages he's given the whole book, it's about faith and a higher power. So I accepted it. I accepted it much more than I did the final confrontation. And now the very end of it, I like quite a bit, but the final confrontation, I mean, you had so much buildup. It was like, what can you do that was any bigger without it just completely jumping the shark? So honestly, I think he's written much worse endings than this. I mean, I just talked about Needful Things today, guys. That has like one of my least favorite endings that he's ever wrote, but an amazing book, an amazing book. But I wouldn't even put this on the bottom half of my least favorite endings of his. But I do know that they are two that are very, very passionate discussions about them. I'll take either one of these endings over the Dark Towers ending.
See, that's where you hurt me. That's where you actually drive in the spike. We will have our moment to talk about the Dark Towers ending. Although I think for you, it's more of a final,
more decisions made in 6 and 7 than the actual ending. Yeah.
Yes, it's more of that whole arc as opposed to the ending of the series, which I feel like I can accept that a little bit more than just flat out hating the ending. I agree with your perspective on The Stand. So I felt like I can see how it would make people angry, especially after that long of a journey through this entire journey. But I also felt that it was fitting. I did enjoy it. With it, the ending really got me. I don't know. I think it's much like you said, there's kind of a double ending for it. So you have the final confrontation, and then you have the ending of the book. And I felt like the true ending was beautiful. I cried. It was heart-wrenching. It is heart-wrenching. It is a beautiful ending to a fantastic book.
Yeah, I think, at that point, you're the 8th loser, right? You're the 8th member of the loser club, and you feel like you're losing friends, so there's that. And then there's what's actually happening in the story. And it's just a dagger. So that's why I would say, I wish it would have never ended. I wish it was still going. I wish I was still reading it. So people who say it's too long, I'm like, no, it's not long enough.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I do, as you say you're the 8th loser, I do wonder a lot about, and this kind of throws back to what you were talking about in terms of childhood being very different now than it was then. I feel like the definition of what makes somebody a loser is a little bit different. I think for a lot of us on Booktube, if you are in the pocket of Booktube that we inhabit, which is, the plus 30 pocket of Booktube, the things that we enjoyed and that brought us to this point where we get on here and we talk about fantasy books and we talk about these types of things, they were not popular. They were the kinds of things that would have put you in the loser club back then. But I feel like these things, our interests have become much more mainstream. So I don't know if that's necessarily true. And maybe that's where some of the nostalgia comes from, because I don't think anybody wants to be a gatekeeper, but I think we also all kind of look back and are like, we've liked these things for a long time, even when.
Sure. I have lots of the back in my day moments when I realized I guess I could be accused of gatekeeping. I'm never saying that no one else could enjoy it. I'm just saying, I think back to in high school, after baseball practice, I had a Flash t-shirt on. And I got ridiculed like crazy for wearing that. And flash forward to, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I hear, behind me, two 50-something-year-old ladies arguing who was better, Iron Man or Captain America. So I was like, wow, how things have changed, right? So I think it's just being a nerd is more socially acceptable now than it used to. Now with the advent of the Kindle and audiobooks, you got a lot more people consuming stories than they used to. So I think, yeah, you do have a lot more people. I mean, just my channel alone, I get, a dozen messages or emails a day telling me you've got me back into reading. It was something I never thought I was going to get interested in again. So that's why I do this. And I'm glad there is an outlet for it. But I think it is more socially acceptable these days to have your nose buried in a book. I'm like, how is it any different than having your phone buried in your face if it's a book instead of your phone? How is it any different? I think, and so I think people are more accepting of it now. Like when I was in high school, I'd be reading a book, and I'd be creepy Stephen King kid, in high school. What are you reading that for?
Weird Stephen King.
So, but yeah, it's very different now, especially with that third King Renaissance that the It movie brought a lot of new fans into it, and it made it more socially acceptable. I think, not just, oh, my dad used to read those books, so.
Right. Definitely. And I think back, like there are terms that we use and things that, like my mom, for example, who is not a fantasy fan, things that she knows that 30 years ago, she would have had no idea about. And I told Patrick a story a couple of days ago, a funny story. We were sharing kind of like teenage dating horror stories. And so I was telling him about when I was, I don't know, like 12 or 13, like the age when you first start to notice, members of the opposite sex, or I guess members of the people you are attracted to. Right. So I really liked this boy, and I overheard him at school tell somebody that I looked like an elf. And I was like so happy. And I went home and I was like, he thinks I'm Arwen. He thinks I'm Indian. This is amazing. We're going to be in love. Only to find out that an elf to him was like, I don't know. Goblin.
Yeah.
Says elf or something, like not something desirable whatsoever. And was heartbroken. I was like, how can we have such radically different perspectives on what this word means? But I think that, yes, in terms of popular culture, we have come a long way in understanding and accepting the things that maybe would have gotten us tossed into the losers club, a couple of decades ago.
People might argue it now, but it seems kind of funny. And if at first you're probably gonna be like, what are you talking about? I really think it happened in the late 90s when wrestling became socially acceptable for people to enjoy and talk about. All of a sudden, then you have superhero movies break out big. You have all this stuff that never really was ever considered socially acceptable. I mean, you never see people talking about video games and stuff like they do now. I mean, you were a video game nerd, or you were a comic book nerd, or you were just a book nerd. That was these things that were just like, oh, weirdo. Why don't you go like, talk to a girl or something, bro? That's the kind of stuff that I used to get. Like I remember talking about Lord of the Rings. It was kind of like that. These actually might be stealing this from an episode of Friends, but because it resonated with me so well. Where he's like, you never read Lord of the Rings? You didn't read Lord of the Rings in high school? He's like, no, I got laid in high school. I was like, well, I was the kid reading Lord of the Rings in high school and Dune in high school, So yeah, it was a little different than it is now, I think.
Most definitely. But after reading it, I feel like the Losers Club would not be a place that I would be unhappy to be in. Maybe I would.
No, I mean, except the Henry Bowers part and the big scary clown part. No, that was definitely the kind of group of kids I hung out with, up to and including the one really awesome tomboy girl that we were all secretly in love with, but we just viewed her as one of the guys, So, yeah.
And she was stuck in that role then. She couldn't get out of it. But I do have some questions, some spoilery questions. So you're the first person that I've really talked to since I finished it. So as we continue, hopefully the first part was helpful for people who have not read these books, but I really just want to talk about it. Yes, read them, please. Read both of them, whichever one you think that you will prefer. Start with that one, but then read the next one as well. And if you're a big, scaredy cat like me, it is not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I think
someone on Discord told me that the
scarier in the book,
made it much scarier. So
Audible? Yeah. How long is that audiobook? Like 60 hours or something?
That's a good question. I don't know. And I can't do the 2 times or 3 times speed that people do. It just sounds like gibberish in my ear.
I can't do any audiobooks. But I hear these people talking about 2.5 speed, 2.4 speed. So I was like, is it like chipmunks? Like, no, it doesn't sound like that. I'm like, I don't know. I can't pay attention. I guess it's just too many years of blocking out my kids that I just can't listen to audiobooks. So.
No, totally.
I wish I could. I get through a lot more books than I do now.
Yes, it's helpful for the commute. I have to say, I do like the nonfiction on audio because it takes up my car time,
Hmm.
which is nice. But to start off the spoiler-y part, what I would like to get your opinion on, because I have not experienced this, I actually saw It Chapter 1 in theaters, which was a production. So my friends had already seen it. My husband really wanted to see it. And everyone was like, you love Stephen King. You need to go. And I was like, oh, it does look like it's pretty good. I guess maybe I'll go see it. It was like one of the worst experiences of my life. I was so scared. By the time I got out of the chair, like my whole body was cramping because I had been like in this little tiny ball in the movie theater chair. So I did not see Chapter 2, but as someone who's, I'm sure you've seen both of them, how do you feel like they did in terms of adapting? And I haven't seen the original. So how did the two adaptations compare for you?
It seems like me and Jaime seem like feel like we're on an island. That's Jaime and Fuego, for people who don't know. That's like the King guy on Booktube, even though he doesn't call himself a booktuber, even though he's reviewed every single Stephen King book, but he says he's not a booktuber. He's on the horror show. Check him out. He's and I both believe that the 1990 TV movie is a superior version because it does follow the book better. It is 1950s and 1980s, and where the new movie, it was the 80s and present day. And in my opinion, they only did that so they could capitalize on the success of Stranger Things.
Right.
Which I was like, you guys, those guys were making it. They were influenced by it. Now you're going to be influenced by them. So anyway, that was just kind of a sticking point for me. As for the movie itself, like part one, I know that everybody loved that one better. I was like, it was all right. I liked it. I didn't feel exactly like the book that I read. They captured some of the stuff really well. I thought they did the Beverly and Ben stuff really good. They kept My Hair is Winter Fire. I always loved that part. Everyone seemed to hate part two. And I came out of the theater saying, that felt more like the book to me than part one did. So it was probably a little overlong. It did kind of change some things. I think they got Grown Up Ben all wrong. But again, both of those adaptations are miles better than most Stephen King adaptations. So I'll take what I can get there for sure. But I think as a book reader, you might like two a little better than people who didn't read the book, because people who didn't read the book seem to actively hate part two.
Okay.
People who did read it seem to find a lot more redeeming qualities that other people didn't do, is even if they did get some wrong. Like I was excited about James McAvoy playing Old Ben. He was just all right. I expected him to hit a home run there, but yeah, I don't know.
Was there someone who you did feel like embodied their character really well, a really good casting?
Bill Hader kind of surprised me as older Richie. I think he played Richie better than the Wolf Finn Wolfhard, whatever his name is. I think he played the Richie that I imagine much better than the kid did. So that surprised me too, because I still think of Bill Hader as a comedy guy. And that was when I think I first started realizing that horror and comedy, there's really a fine line there, because comedy, it's all about timing. And I think the same is true with horror. That's why you see people like Danny McBride, who worked in comedy, and now he's working in horror, did Halloween, he did Alien and stuff now. So yeah, I think there's a key, Jordan Peele. I mean, obviously that guy really came up in horror, in comedy, and now he's doing horror. So I think there's a fine line there that it isn't as fine as we thought it was. It really is kind of close.
It's all adrenaline. It's just
yeah. But I'd like to hear your opinion on it, because I didn't hate part two. I don't know, but it seems like a lot of people did. I don't know if it was the cast or just it was kind of overlong in some points. They still were scared of the ending. They were scared of the intergalactic space spider thing, so they try to do something a little different. And yes, that scene is not there, and
not in the first one either, right?
Yeah, no. In the original, in the original movie, they pass around Eddie's inhaler instead of passing around Bev. And in the new movie, they all cut their hand with same piece of glass, and get, and it's the 80s, guys. What are y'all doing? You don't be doing blood transfusions. Yeah. But yeah, everyone wants to. You want to talk about that scene? Or do you want to talk about it? I mean, we got to. Every time I talk about it, I always say I'm not going to talk about that scene.
People are going to comment anyway.
I hate that this is an amazing book, and that's all anybody ever wants to talk about, is that thing that's 6 pages long. That's all they want to talk about. 1,200 pages. You want to talk about those 6 pages? Yeah. Stephen was really on the bad stuff back then, guys. It was going to happen, and yeah, it probably did go too far. It doesn't ruin the book.
No, and I think a lot of people know about it going in. Like when you hear about it, like, sexual.
Is that the one with the gangbang? Yeah.
But yes, that's what comes up. So I knew that it was going to be there. I didn't know how it was going to be written, if this was going to be a fade to black, if it was going to be I was hoping that it was going to, I know, just don't cut.
He doesn't turn the camera away. No.
I was hoping that it was going to be written in a way that was intentionally supposed to elicit disgust. Like you are, the intention of this scene is for you to be revolted. And I think I understand that he was trying to display some sort of, loss of innocence, transition from childhood to adulthood. Mm-hmm. I did not need any details, but especially the level of detail that I was given. But like you said, it's 5 pages in a 1,200 page book. And that is how I'm going to look at it. That is how I think about it. And even when I was thinking about the book afterwards, I'm like, if I was going to give this a rating, how would I rate it? And I was like, should the fact that this made me really uncomfortable change my rating? But I don't think so. I still had such a good time that I still really believe that it is his masterwork. I think that he did so many things well, and he made one really strange decision, and I'm going to snip that part out of my brain, I think, and just
Yeah, I understand in interviews and stuff what he was going for. Like I even saw one where he's like, I still don't understand why people still have such a problem with him. I'm like, dude, just stop. Just say I was high. You got the easy out there, but again, I hate that that's all that people want to talk about when they talk about this book. It frustrates me. Like when I did my review, I said, I'm not going to talk about that scene. People are like, we got to talk about that scene. And I was like, that's all. Every other person who reviews this book talks about that scene, So.
What are you going to say about it? Like, there's no defending it. There's no.
I don't think there's anybody's like that. You can't lose that scene. It's way too important. Honestly, I think if it would just had been like just Ben and Beverly or something like that, would have accepted it much better. Okay, they're having underage sex. They probably shouldn't be doing that, but okay, it just seems a really weird place to be doing that. But the passing around stuff, probably not.
Yeah, and just it is definitely strange. But you know what? Since we're comparing the two books, there's some weird sexual stuff in the stand too. That's going to make you pretty uncomfortable when you read it. Which is kind of a, it's kind of a parallel to The Gunslinger. There's, a very similar kind of scene with a revolver, and it's
abortion. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's what can you say? I don't even know.
I say every Stephen King book, even this was classic era, has got some of those Stephen moments. I mean, they do. I mean, he's my favorite author, but I'm not going to sit here and say, there's moments that make me facepalm, even some of his best books ever. Because no writer's perfect, right? I mean,
no, most definitely. But yeah, some strange moments in both books, but you kind of know what's going to happen. And that's one thing that I like about his books, is that even if you know what's coming, because for a lot of his classic works like Carrie or It or Pet Sematary, even, you kind of know what the big hook is and what the big reveal is going to be. And it doesn't matter, because he makes you care so much about the characters and what they're going through and the journey that they take to get there, that knowing the twist is really the smallest part. I feel like he is not an author who relies on that denouement. He doesn't rely on you discovering the big mystery. That's not what his books are about. And I think that that's what makes them really great.
That's a great point, because I say that my biggest Stephen King pet peeve is in the first third of the book when he's talking about a character, and he'd just be like, and it would be the last time he ever saw him alive again. I'm like, why are you ruining this for me, dude? Why are you ruining character deaths for me? And I'm always like, I hate it. Why do you do that? And you know what? I'll be damned if 200 pages later when it happens, I'm not upset about it, because I grew to love the character so much. So he's just that good that he can be like, you know what? I can tell you what pitch I'm about to throw, and I bet you still can't hit it. That's the kind of writer that he is, and I love it for it.
Most definitely. I did not realize. So one thing that I did not know, with all the things that I knew about it. So I knew about giant space spider. I knew about uncomfortable sexual scene. I knew a lot of things. I did not know that Eddie died, and that they had to his
dagger
body in the sewer. What a punch.
Yeah, it's awful. In fact, it's my kid's first real hard horror film, was the 1990 It. He's 9, and he wanted to watch it, and he liked it a lot. I mean, he's going as Georgie for Halloween, for God's sake. So he obviously liked it. I'm like, really? So that's one you're going to pick, huh? The kid who died in the first, the pre-credits. Okay. Anyway, and yeah, he was really broke up about Eddie. So I was like, yeah, it's like that when you read it too. I mean, again, you feel like these are your best friends. So yeah, he makes those character deaths count. And the fact that there isn't, several of them falling off. Stan kind of happens so early before you're super connected to him. So that one's just like, well, that sucks. Why did he just spend 40 pages giving this guy a backstory just to have him go upstairs and kill himself? But with Eddie, you went on 2 journeys, his childhood and in this adult side of him. And it's heartbreaking.
And I think he makes you fall in love with Stan too. So when I read it, I also did not know, because I had seen chapter 1 of the movie and I had heard like big things, but I also didn't know that Stan completed suicide. And so when that happened, I was like, well, this is really early in the book. Like, are you going to make me fall in love with him? My heart's going to be closed off now. And no, by the end, I was so upset by the fact that I knew that he was already dead, because you get to see his childhood unfold over the course of the book. And then you feel for him, and the moments that maybe wouldn't have meant as much had you not known his fate. You can see the kind of the cracks in his foundation, and where that sense of grappling with reality really hits him in a different way than it does the other members of the club. So it's heartbreaking.
A lesser author could tell you, hey, this character dies, and you just wouldn't give a shit the rest of the way. He finds a way to do it. It's a superpower. It's crazy.
It wings you. There's no escaping. You cannot get out of it without falling in love with the characters. But the ending. So I'm guessing the final confrontation is, you're talking about like the very, very end, when it's just the spider.
I mean, it's like what else could he do? What's something really fucking scary? I mean, I'm scared to death of spiders. So sure, hey, cool. It works, I guess. The whole ritual of Chud thing was freaking Lovecrafty weird, and I love it. I'm all here for it and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, what could he have done at that point? I mean, there'd been so much buildup. I almost just preferred he would have just been the clown. I don't know. I don't know what he could have done that could have changed it or whatever. But again, it doesn't ruin the book. And okay, cool. They won. I mean, they ripped his heart out. There's always been that possibility of, oh, what if it laid eggs, stuff like that. What if they didn't get them all? But he doesn't, besides Dr. Sleep, he doesn't really do sequels or Dark Tower. So yeah, who knows? Maybe one day Joe Hill will write it.
It'll come out. That scene with the egg breaking was like viscerally disgusting as Ben is going through and stuff. I was like, I would not want this job. This is the grossest part of this.
I also think it was really cool to give us one POV with Pennywise at the end. I thought that was really, really cool, and something that I never expected to see. So I think you get one of those, I believe, with Randall, 1 or 2 of those with Randall Flagg as well. But getting it with Pennywise is really kind of crazy.
I think the part that scared me the most, and I think this is why Pet Sematary scared me a lot as well. Stephen King does a great job of making you petrified of your place in the universe, like this visceral, nihilistic type fear of, why are we here and what is out there and what's going to happen. And in those scenes when they do the ritual the first time, and their kind of space is opening up, and there's this threat of the dead lights and what you can recognize in this horror, it is scary. I find that stuff to be a lot scarier than the childhood fears that they have.
Sure. No, when he's talking about what Matra and the turtle, like burping, and that was our universe. And I'm just like, what in the world am I reading here? So yeah, good stuff. Maybe he was the one that was on the Indian opiates and stuff while he was writing this. Who knows? Maybe.
I also want to know which house hurt Stephen King as a kid, because
he's always got a scary house.
Right, there's so many scary houses. You haven't read Black House yet, have you?
I haven't read Black House, but I did when I just read Drawing of Three, The Wastelands again.
Yep.
And the scary house now, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stuff that makes you think of Nebolt Street for sure.
Yes, there's so many parallels. That's exactly what I was thinking about, was the Dark Tower. When I
think Haunting a Hill House is one of his favorite books, so I think he just always loves the idea of a big scary house.
That makes sense. Have you read The Haunting of Hill House?
I have.
I guess you have. Great. I've been scared to read it. I think that one would genuinely.
You've done this. I think you'll be fine.
They have really nice editions though. The Penguin horror editions that are black with just one color. They have a really nice one for that book. So maybe I will have
recommend it. She's great. Shirley Jackson's amazing.
I will check it out. I don't know. Sometimes I read a Stephen King book and I'm like, you know what? I can handle horror. This is okay. I think I actually kind of like it. But then if I try to pick up something, I'm like, no, Sarah, you just like
jump the gun a little bit. Yeah.
Like, it's Stephen King. But yeah, I really liked, so we talked about your favorite character being Ben. I found it really hard to separate them. I thought of them so much as a group
Yeah.
of characters, but I do really like Ben. I feel like Ben must be a fan favorite. It's, that's the story that
I
everybody
think for
likes.
boys, it's because we've always had either one of two things. We were fat when we were younger, or we were in love with that girl that thought someone else was the one writing her love letters and poetry and stuff. I think that we both can relate to that. Also, like Ben, I'm the one who, grew up with a single parent. I'm the one who grew up, moving to a new area where I didn't know anybody kind of thing. So just so many things with him just kind of sunk into my own life that I was like, okay, I went through these experiences. I never felt like, oh, hey, he's writing me into this book. I've never been that person, but a lot of those things like relatable to me, to where I'm like, okay, I'm rooting for this guy because I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been the kid, everybody else is out having fun. I'm in the library reading, so many things about Ben that I could relate to. But unfortunately, I never, made it as an architect later in life, so can't say I did everything.
You did marry a redhead though.
Yeah, I did marry a redhead, and I've used that. What was funny is I think around 2012 or so, I was reading this again, and I just looked at her one night and I said, "Your hair is winter fire, January." And she was all like, she had no idea I was reciting the book. So
You were supposed to send her a postcard. Come on, for your anniversary.
I step up my game for sure.
Mm-hmm. When you can borrow from a 12-year-old, that's when you know that he knew what was up.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about the space spider, so the kind of the final confrontation, but the ending of the book,
crushed me.
The true ending, how sad, how heartbreaking.
To me, it was like, okay, so these groups of characters have been through hell together twice, and now they're not even going to remember each other. It just breaks my heart every time I even think about it. Yeah, it's terrible.
And I think it made Eddie's death hit even harder for me, because
no one's going to remember him. Yeah.
No one's going to remember him except this, sad wife that he has, who, like, basically he's just the person to soothe her anxiety. I'm not even sure how much genuine affection there is.
Married his mother, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Basically. So I thought that was heartbreaking. He's just going to be there beneath those sewers with no one to remember him. It was so sad.
Yeah, I think that there's one, and I don't remember if this is in the book or if this was from the 1990 movie, because I just watched it like a month ago with my kid. Is I think where Mike's talking about, hey, I can always just write these words down, but the pages will fade over time. And yeah, God, it just destroys you, man. It destroys it. Now the magic bike ride, whatever, that's fine, but just the idea that they're not ever going to remember each other, just crushing.
It is, and very appropriate, I think, for the themes. You're watching the transition from childhood to adulthood, and then they go back and they're put back into this perspective that they had 27 years ago. But the reality is, for a lot of people, you do grow apart and the memories do fade, and you do forget. And I think it might be in the author's note in the edition of the book that I had, where Stephen King says, you might think that you remember your childhood, and you might think that you know what happened, but you don't. And it's true.
Sure, we watched a movie and like some kid will have some name I haven't heard forever, and all of a sudden I'll have like this run through time of this one kid I knew with that name back in like second grade. I'm like, I haven't thought about that in like 30 years, So yeah, that's true.
Definitely. So for you said you reread it not too long ago. How many times have you read it? Is it not like Dune, is it, where you've read it?
No. Well, Dune, I think you can read that in, a week. I don't think you can. I mean, I guess you could read it in a week if you like just didn't eat and you didn't go to work. But no, I've only read it twice. But I've watched the movie about 400 times, the 1991 and the new one, once with myself and once with my wife for each one, because she was too scared to go to the theater, because she's read it. We got together. That's how I knew she was right for me. She'd only read one Stephen King book, and it was it. But just reading it again a second time was just like, okay, this is great, because when I read it the first time, I loved the stuff with the kids because I was 15. I hadn't done any of those life experiences, adult stuff. But now that I was reading it again as an adult with kids, kind of like I said with Pet Sematary, completely different experience, because it turned into, okay, well, that kid with stuff with the kids now for me is nostalgia. And now I'm dealing with like these real life problems and stuff like the adults are. So that's what makes his book so great. I think that different ages like that will get different things out of them.
Yeah, you can definitely experience them at different parts of your life. If your dad gives you Stephen King books when you're 12, you experience them a certain way, and then
if you'd read Pet Sematary when you were a teenager, you'd be like, okay, cool, this is a cool, scary book. And then you read it after having kids and you're like, this is even scarier than I thought it was, because it's different now. You're looking at it from the parents' point of view. It's tough.
Yeah, most definitely. I need to decide what to read next now. So it was kind of my biggest missing piece from all the Stephen King.
I'll have to go through your list of what you haven't read, and I'll give my opinion.
You can. I did pick up a couple of hardcovers at the secondhand bookstore not too long ago. I was very surprised to go in and see them, and I felt really good when I bought them. And I got Revival, which I've heard a lot of good things about, and I think you really like that as well, right?
Yeah, if you're into that coming of age through all the way through like adulthood, like he starts literally as like a 5-year-old kid and it goes all the way through like his 50s. I love it when he does that. It's the best.
Awesome. No, I think that I will like that. And of course, I have not read 11/22/63.
Yes.
Excellent. Good. I feel like this is not my country's history, so I always mess up the date. I'm like, I don't want to get this wrong. But I am looking forward to reading that one as well. So that's pretty high on the list too. But Revival seems like it'll be a little bit quicker. Probably I can
Revival, yeah, you can read that in a few days. It's page turner. 11/22/63 it's a journey. It's very much not quite like The Stand, but you're going to be reading it for a while. Just take your time with it.
Definitely. I think a lot of that, I'm not going to call it slice of life because it's hard to call anything Stephen King does slice of life, but more of that.
It's a romance novel. It's absolutely a romance novel. And it was one of those things like I told you, I kind of have my breakup with him after Dark Tower ended, and I didn't read anything. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a big JFK assassination nut, so I've got to read this. And that's when I felt like he got his mojo back. When I read that, I was like, tears hitting the page on the last pages. I was like, I didn't think he had this kind of book in him. So it's very different than anything you read by him. It is absolutely a romance book.
Excellent. Well, unlike you, I like reading romance books, so it'll be like a double whammy for me. I will enjoy it from all angles. Awesome. That is probably where I will go next, but I think that is a good natural place to start to wrap things up. I had a request.
You didn't have any spoilers you want to talk about with The Stand first?
Oh yeah, we can talk about some Stand spoilers.
No, it's up to you. It's up to you.
No, it's been longer since I read The Stand. I feel like when I'm talking about it, it's also fresh in my mind. About The Stand. So when you read it relatively recently, right? I
read it for the first time in 2017. Yeah. And people find that maddening. I have my story where I read all of those books that my library had in 1993, except The Stand, because I was it's just too big. I can't read that. I just read it. I was like, I don't have it in me to read another one that long. So I'd always put it off. And so when I read it in 2017, I was completely just amazed by it.
No, it's fantastic. And so if you read it then, you must have read the uncut version.
Yes. That's the only one I've read.
How do you feel about that ending scene with Randall Flagg?
You mean like the whole hand of God thing? I mean, again, I can see the complaints and people think that's kind of hokey. I get it. I do get it. But I mean, if you read his introduction where he says like, this is basically a journey about faith and belief in God kind of thing. I understood the ending. It's one of those where I'm like, was that what I would have done? Well, no, but I'm also not a writer. So I don't know I can't sit here and tell you what I would have done that would have been better, so.
It's a hard book to end. I think the themes are so all encompassing. It's such a huge, like you said, such a huge cast of characters where you're exploring so many things. And it really is, when you get down to the bare bones, it is an exploration of good versus evil and choice and what we do with the choices that we have. So I don't know.
I mean, I hated seeing Larry go out like that, but hey, he had to make a stand, right? And that was his choice. He made that choice, and that was what he needed to do. So
definitely, I really liked Nick in The Stand. He was one of the characters that I really enjoyed, and watching him go out the way that he did. Yes,
Nick and Tom, I love them. Yeah.
Moon spells I love Tom Cullen.
And you'll use that with everything too. Like I got someone got me a mug that says MOON that spells coffee. So yeah, I mean, I'll use it for just about anything. But have you seen the 90s adaptation of The Stand?
I haven't seen any of the adaptations of The Stand.
It's dated, much like the It movie is, but it's better than that CBS garbage we got last year that was just awful. But I mean, it's very 90s. I mean, Randall Flagg has a mullet and wears like a full on, what do they call it? I don't know if this is insulting because I believe you are in Canada. I think they call it a Canadian tuxedo, where it's like blue jeans and a blue jean jacket. So he wears like that, but he's good. He's charismatic. He's really good. The cast is really, really good, especially the actor who plays Tom is just phenomenal.
Awesome. And I could definitely watch The Stand. I don't know why I haven't watched the adaptation. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies, but I don't think it would be scary. The Stand is not
No, it's not
particularly
scary.
scary, so I think I probably could watch it. I have the really unfortunate personality trait of being like unduly optimistic. So when people are making something, I'm like, yes, this is going to be great. And so when they were going to make the Stand TV show, I was like, yes, this is going to be
I
great.
was excited when it was announced. One of my earliest videos in this channel is me going through the cast one by one about how excited I was.
Yeah, no, didn't. And I didn't even watch the first one because I don't think I had access to it immediately. I would have had to like stream it or find it somewhere else. And then once people started talking about it, I was like, it's just going to make you sad, Sarah. Don't do it.
Yeah, I think whenever I finish the book, me and my wife will always watch the adaptation if she doesn't plan to read it. So as I've been redoing the multiverse stuff, we'll always watch like a new Stephen King movie each month. And when we did The Stand, she was like impressed by it, kind of like what I said about the book, that there was that many characters and she liked all of them. So I feel like they captured that well. Same with 11/22/63. Won't tell you the endings that you haven't read it, but she was bawling at the end of it. And I was like, good. I don't feel bad about the tears rolling down when I finish the book then. So yeah.
Awesome. And you just watched, what was the other adaptation that just came out recently? Lizzie's Story?
Lacey's Story.
There we go. How was
Yeah,
it?
I
That was a
actually
good
liked it better
adaptation.
than I actually liked it better than the book. So, but it was written. The show was written by Stephen King. He writes the screenplays for it. So I feel like he fixed everything I didn't like about it.
That you didn't like about the book,
Mhm.
which is, and I think, at least for me, one of the reasons that the adaptations don't ever land is because for most of his books, there's a lot of character development, a lot of introspection, a lot of
Have to
stuff
do
that
in
is
2
really
hours.
hard to translate onto the screen. But with this one, it sounds like it landed a little bit better.
I think the problem is you get screenwriters who are always like that think that they are better writers than Stephen King, and they're not. And they always say, "Oh, well, let me just put my own touch on it here," and they just fundamentally change the whole story. And it's like, well, that was dumb, but you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they keep getting jobs, so whatever.
Yeah, and I think what's nice, I always laugh at people who make like films with a capital F or literature with a capital L, and they feel like they're above certain things. And I think people do get that perspective about Stephen King. And if you put up a Stephen King video, you're guaranteed to get people come in and be like, he writes trash, this is
Oh,
trash. But
schlock. That's what it is. Schlock. He just writes schlock. So let me ask you about this one. We're talking about Larry with Nick. Did you keep hope against hope that Nick was actually alive somehow?
yes.
Me too. Yeah, that guy, Harold Lauer, bastard.
I hate Harold. So I have to admit, like Harold, I hate him more than I hated the like deranged sociopathic characters that Stephen King writes, because I feel like he captures those characters really well. You know that there's something missing. And I think the kid's name, the leech kid, I think his name is Patrick.
Patrick Hockstetter. Yes, thank you.
When you read that, and it's the same thing as his character in Firestarter, the assassin that they hire.
Rainbird. Yeah.
Yes.
Rainbird.
He writes those characters and you understand that there's something missing. Like there's something that's not there inside them. And that is what is pushing them down these paths. But with characters like Harold, who are just like greedy and selfish and, could make all the right choices and they were given the right opportunities, but they're just like those baser parts of them come out. It makes me hate them even more than the truly evil characters. Because part of me thinks, you were born like this, like you suck and you're evil, but that was your path. That was your path along the beam. Harold, you deviated.
It was said every character, you either love to hate him or you hate to love him, and Harold definitely falls on the ladder there for sure.
It's definitely. And I find it harder, like there's not a lot of empathy for a character like Henry Bowers, who is slicing people up and he's got this murderous rage, but you can at least see that he had this horrible life. He was mistreated and abused, and that led to this cycle of mistreatment and abuse. That is what he knew, and that is what he became. But I always find it harder to stomach the entitled characters who feel like they deserve things, and then when they don't get exactly what they want, it makes them mad and they do bad things.
I agree.
I don't like it. But he does a good job of bringing that out of you. I was not unhappy with the way that Harold went out of this story.
Nope, didn't bother me at all. No, I know a lot of people are like, I feel like he's going to have like some redemptive arc. I was like, I didn't want one. No, thanks.
I don't need him to be redeemed. I need him to.
Not after Nick. No, I was like, die like a dog.
Nick. And this is a hard thing to talk about sometimes on Booktube, because you want to make sure that you're being fair and you are, recognizing everybody's experiences. But I think that one thing I really admire in Stephen King's writing is how much inclusivity he included in his books in a time when that was not something that people did. Like, he was writing characters like Nick, who couldn't hear. He was writing characters like Tom Cullen, who had an intellectual disability. He was writing characters like Bill, who had a problem stuttering. He wrote all kinds of characters with all kinds of different experiences, who were neurodiverse, who were totally different in lots of ways. And I'm not saying that he always nailed it 100% based on the standards that we have right now in 2021, but the fact that he was writing these stories and that he was including such a diverse cast of characters, I feel like that gets overlooked a lot, because people like to talk about the times that he doesn't get it quite right. Mm-hmm. But I think he does a great job of giving you such a wide range of perspectives.
No, I think when we were with Philip talking about Dark Tower and say what he did with Odetta, it was amazing, because it was like no one was talking. But back then, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, so that people literally at that time period, it really wasn't that long ago, people really thought it was demonic possession. That's really was her explanation for it. And he actually takes it and puts it in a character that we all end up fucking rooting for, So yeah, he's always been good with that. I mean, just talk about needful things, and he talks about, a person's got like just crippling arthritis. We're dealing with depression. We're dealing with all kinds of things, repressed memories and stuff. Yeah, he's always led the charge on things like that. And I don't think he gets enough credit for doing that a long time before anybody else was doing it.
Definitely. This was not something that came up frequently in fantasy, and I'm assuming in horror. I haven't read that much horror, but science fiction, fantasy, all these things. And I think it's just because he understands regular people. He is trying to tell the stories of regular, everyday people, and he includes, the trials and different characteristics of everyone. And sometimes he gets it really right. Like at the end of it, for example, when Bill's wife is catatonic, and he says, I could take her hand and I could put it up in the air and it stays there. That's what happens. I've had patients like that. Who are in a catatonic depression, and if you take their arms, it's one of the things that you can do. You take them and you put them in a posture, and they will maintain that. And it seems like something that should be impossible, but it does happen. And
Lacey's story deals with that a lot. Repressed memory, catatonia, a lot. So I think maybe if it didn't feel like work for you, you might actually click on some of those things more than I did. People that have to like cut themselves and stuff. So it deals with a lot of stuff. But yeah, he does this a ton, and I think it's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think, like I said, sometimes, it doesn't, there's going to be times when you try something and it doesn't fully land all the way, but I think that he deserves his credit where it is due.
And I think it feels natural with him. And this is probably going to sound stupid to some people, but like some of the criticisms I had with like Brandon Sanderson lately, I was like, I feel like, okay, I've got to create a character and I got to put these 5 little check boxes on them here. And I'm like, it's not earned, with his, it's just so natural. It's just something that character does. And I love that he's able to do that just so seamlessly, but it does make you think afterwards, as someone who's got a kid on the spectrum now, anytime that it deals with something like that, I'm like, that's really interesting. Like John Gwynn actually wrote a character because he has an autistic child, and he wrote that into a book. And I was like, that's great. That's great. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good to have that lived experience. And I think we all know Stephen King's very open about it, the fact that he has struggled with substance use and depression. And sometimes, no matter how talented you are, there are certain things that you need to live and experience in order to translate them into a character in a way that feels natural.
Yeah, they need to get that out so they don't all become Harold Lowers.
Right? We don't want any more Harolds.
No.
No, but that is one of my favorite things about him. And whenever I see these that's not real literature, like, why are you even reading that? I challenge you to find someone who writes the everyday man better than Stephen King. Like in this video, leave it in the comments. Tell me someone that you think does that better, because I honestly can't think of anyone. And I would say that I read pretty widely across genres, a lot of literary fiction that is just essentially character study. And I think just because he is in that horror subgenre, and because he uses everyday vernacular, and he makes his characters talk the way that people talk, and he explains things in a way that everybody can understand, that somehow it gets looked down upon.
Yeah, I've always said I love the way that he is able to write how kids actually talk to each other. It seems
Yes.
like no author can do this. I'm like, you guys just, this guy is like 70 something. And he still remembers how kids talk to each other. And you guys can't do it. And you're like in your 30s, you know?
Mhm.
So I think that's always been great. But that's what kind of rose the bar for me to the point now where I'm like, if you can have, I say this a lot about fantasy books, you can have the most incredible writing style in the world, absolutely beautiful prose. You can have the most amazing developed world. If I don't care about your characters, I don't care about your book. So there it is. It's just too many Stephen King books for me now.
I'm like, he has ruined you. He's ruined you for anybody else.
He has.
And so how many of his books do you have left to get to?
Oh, hell. I don't know. I'd say less than, 10 at this point that I haven't actually read. I went through most of that stuff during that breakup phase now. I think I still got like Blaze. I don't know. I have to get back to you on that one, but it's not as many as I thought it was, because most of these are all rereads for me now, but there are only a couple of first time reads for me.
And is that what you're going to do, get to the ones that you haven't gotten to as you get there into the multiverse?
Yeah, the only reason I moved Revival up was just because I was tired of Jaime telling me how amazing it was. I was like, I don't want to wait like 4 more years, going through the multiverse to get to it. So that's why I moved that one up. There's other ones I might move, and obviously if it's a new release, I usually read those immediately. Like I already read Billy Summers and stuff. So as long as it's a novel and not a short story collection, I'll usually read those right away.
And I did watch Jaime's tier ranking of all the Stephen King books, and if I remember, he thinks more favorably on the Talisman than you do, right?
He does. He likes the Talisman more than me, and he does not think Drawing of the Three is as good as I do. That's about the only places where we differ, but that's okay.
I'm scared to go back and reread the Talisman.
Larry Underwood's both of our favorite characters, so there you go. Yeah, I think the Talisman is one of those, if you read it when you were younger, you'll probably like it a lot more than if you do now. Because I'm sorry, I just couldn't get past Richard. Richard was just so obnoxious. I couldn't stand him. It was like going on vacation with an ambulance.
But you will read Black House.
Yeah. When it gets to that point, I mean, from what I understand, people who love Talisman didn't like Black House. I'm like, well, shoot, maybe it'll be opposite for me.
It's very
look. I want to see Jack again, so sure, absolutely.
And there's a lot of Dark Tower crossover tie-in type stuff in Black House, so that's a good reason to read.
Always a good reason.
Yeah, that's the only reason that you need, right? That's all you need to do to put it on the list.
I mean, hell, even Joe Hill's doing it now, so sure.
Right. I'm excited about that. I have to say I'm tentatively excited for him to have permission to kind of play around in his dad's multiverse.
Well, knowing what a scaredy cat you are, I would recommend Nosferatu before I would recommend Heart-Shaped Box. Heart-Shaped Box actually kind of stuck in my head for a few days. One part where I kind of we got new furniture, and I went out in the living room in the middle of the night. I didn't recognize the way that it curves, and it looked like someone's leg. And there's just reminded me of a scene in Heart-Shaped Box where I was like, oh shit. Yeah. So yeah, I think that one might actually scare you a little more. So I say do Nosferatu. I think you'd enjoy that one. It's got a good coming of age story in it for sure.
And it's a Christmas book, right? It's a Christmas novel.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
That's what I'll recommend on my channel. If you want a nice, heartwarming Christmas novel, here you go.
There you go. Christmas horror.
No, I think I will try to add it to the TBR because I do want to check it out. So do you have any big buddy reads coming up for 2022?
Yeah, we're going to be dipping into Tad Williams for the first time. That's Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is a series. Actually, my brother's been trying to get me to read since I was 20. Because he says that's what George R.R. Martin ripped off with The Song of Ice and Fire. So he's been real big on that. So I'm interested to see if he's right or not. But yeah, there's a handful of us that are going to be doing that in January while I continue Malazan.
The never ending read along.
I got 4 books left though, so it's great. But they're massive. So I feel like the next 4 books are probably, you could read Dark Tower twice before you finish these next 4 books. So. But I noticed you tapped out after the first Malazan book, didn't you?
No, I didn't start it. I didn't.
I thought you started. Okay, so I'm sorry.
I have tried to start the Wheel of Time to go in with the TV show, and I have to be honest, I am really struggling to get through even the first one. And I think if I'm struggling to get through the first one, it doesn't bode well for the remainder. I am still going to try. I'm wondering if it's just, wrong time, or I'm going to feel more invested in the story on book 2. But
my advice at this point, if you're feeling that way, is watch the show when it comes out. And if you're really liking the show, then maybe, because I know there's some people who tried to read Lord of the Rings before the movie came out. Mm-hmm. And they just weren't feeling it. And then they loved Fellowship of the Ring. And then they went back and they said it helped them because it gave them kind of a picture of the world. It helped them put faces with the names and stuff like that. So maybe try that, but yeah, it's not for everyone. I mean, if you're not crazy into traditional fantasy, it might not work with you. But the first book is different than the rest of the series, and I hate telling people that because I always be like, "Hey, make it through the 700-page book first, and then decide if you like the series." I try not to be that person, but it is very different after book one.
Yeah, it's the writing style definitely is an adjustment. I think there is very detail oriented, which can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes. I'm
I'll
not
let you
a
know what a
super
dress looks
visual
like.
reader. Like and he gives a lot of detail. So I think if you like visualizing things, it would be wonderful for you because you can really paint a picture in your mind. I don't do that anyway. So it really, it is, I'm struggling, and I hate to say it because I know so many people love it and I really want to love it too. And hopefully that'll change, but it's been a little bit of a struggle so far.
Better to face it now than wait till you're like on book 6 and being like, this isn't working for me, so
hundreds of thousands of words in, but we have moved on past the Stephen King topics now, but it's only because you're so easy to talk to, Mike. I could talk to you for a long time.
I love talking to other people. I say I love being writer, director, producer of my own thing, and being able to do that. But it does sometimes. I'm like, I do wish someone was talking back to me once in a while. So that's why I try to make sure anytime anyone asks me to do a crossover, I try to make sure I make it a priority to do that and have people on mine and things like that. So
awesome. Well,
yeah,
thank you.
I'm happy to do it.
I loved talking to you about a book that you clearly love so much and that I enjoyed so much. And yeah, I was just really happy to have you on the channel. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you finally read it. I will allow you to be in my quartet now. So
thank you. Thank you.
And I'll be interested to see what you read next for sure.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your night. And thanks so much for coming on.
You do the same.
Bye.